The topics in this presentation do not supersede or replace any local, state, or federal regulations. All work shall be performed in compliance with OSHA regulations, as well as the facility's policies and procedures. Welcome to Lake Road Generating Facility, where safety is a core value. It is our policy to provide our staff, contractors, visitors, and guests with a safe and healthy site of employment. Lake Road Generating is a combined cycle, natural gas-fired, power generating facility. The main components are 3 identical gas and steam turbines, heat recovery steam generators, and air-cooled condensers. All contractors working in the production areas of the plant will undergo safety orientation prior to accessing the plant. After completing the safety orientation, you will be issued a contractor safety sticker to place on your hard hat. Site orientation training must be performed annually. All workers shall have had applicable OSHA training from their own company prior to starting work on site. During outages, you may be issued a site access badge. This badge must be used each time you enter and exit the plant. Never operate any plant equipment without the plant's explicit permission. Stay clear of all pumps, motors, and valves, as they may start without notice. Let's take a look at the site. Notice the primary buildings and their locations. The administration building, which contains the control room and maintenance shop. The 3 identical generation buildings, which contains a combustion turbine and steam turbine. The air-cooled condensers, or ACCs, heat recovery steam generators, or HRSGs, and transformers. To the north is the high-voltage switchyard. To the south, the water treatment building. And to the southeast, the warehouse. Lake Road Generating has 3 identical units. Each unit is differentiated by a color and number. Unit 1 is yellow, Unit 2 is blue, and Unit 3 is green. All contractor personal vehicles must park in the designated contractor parking areas as seen highlighted here. Contractor vehicles approved to be on site may be issued a parking pass. This parking pass must be displayed while on plant property. The speed limit leading up to the plant and inside the plant boundary is 10 miles per hour for all vehicles and motorized equipment. Once inside the plant during normal plant operating conditions, please go directly to the administration building to check in. Weapons, drugs, and alcohol are strictly forbidden on the property. Lake Road Generating reserves the right to search all personal property. No level of impairment is permitted while on site. Lake Road Generating uses 19% aqueous ammonia on site. Ammonia is a colorless, highly irritating gas with a sharp, suffocating odor. If at any time you detect an odor, you should immediately leave the area and contact the control room. Special precautions need to be taken when working on or near the ammonia equipment and piping. Other chemicals used in process include natural gas, propane, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, argon, sodium hydroxide, sulfuric acid, diesel fuel, turbine lube oil, hydraulic oil, and transformer oil. In the event you are involved in an incident, accident, injury, unplanned event, fire, or hazardous condition, immediately contact the control room to report the issue. Once the evacuation notice has been given, work must be stopped, confined spaces cleared, and all personnel must evacuate to the designated evacuation point. An employee roster will be taken to the muster point, where you should remain available for roll call until you are released. In the event of an incident that would require plant evacuation, pertinent information will be transmitted over plant radios on Channel 1. Remember, after you evacuate to the designated muster point, do not leave the assigned muster point. Lake Road Generating has 3 designated muster points, as seen here. The primary evacuation point is located at the east side of the water treatment building. The secondary evacuation point is located at the northeast corner of the property, south of the gas compressor building. And the tertiary is the west side of the facility, along the fence near Unit 3's ACC fan. Lake Road Generating has specific emergency response procedures to deal with emergencies on site. Please ask your plant contact for further information on what responsibilities you may have. The control room will call 911 for all plant emergencies, medical and fire services as needed. Plant fire extinguishers of different types and sizes are located around the site. Firefighting equipment must not be used for other than its intended purpose. Remember, Plant extinguishers are not to be used for routine hot work. Only use an extinguisher if you are trained and you feel it is safe to do so. Please ask your site contact for additional information. If at any time a portion of a plant's fire protection is used, damaged, removed, or obstructed, the control room must be notified. Within the plant, there are fixed fire protection systems. These systems consist of wet sprinkler, wet chemical, and dry chemical suppression systems. These systems are present in the gas turbine enclosures, steam turbine, warehouse, and the administration building. Fire alarm pull stations are located throughout the plant. The fire alarm will sound when the hard-fixed fire protection equipment or pull station is activated. The fire alarm, which sounds like the following, will sound for notification of fire. Please listen for specific instructions issued from the control room by radio for evacuation instructions. Good housekeeping must be maintained at all times. Do not allow waste paper, cardboard boxes, or other materials to accumulate. Always maintain aisles, exits, and keep emergency equipment free of all obstructions. Oily rags and waste shall be disposed of properly, and the designated and labeled bins around the facility. All accidents, incidents, and injuries must be reported to the control room immediately. The control room will summon medical and fire services as needed. Report all incidents as soon as they occur. Call the control room at the inside line 8302 or by radio channel 1. A report of personal injury shall be completed within 24 hours and submitted to Lake Road Generating, or, when possible, before the injured person and witnesses leave the site. There are 2 automated external defibrillators, AED, located on the site. One in the administration building and one in the passageway between Units 1 and 2. First aid cabinets are located in the maintenance shop, warehouse, and one in the passageways between Units 1 and 2 and Units 2 and 3. Safety shower stations are located around the plant. If you are exposed to a chemical requiring you to use an eye wash or safety shower, you must inform the control room operator as soon as possible. Lake Road Generating treats all environmental events seriously. Treat all leaks as potentially harmful. Report any leaks to your plant contact or site personnel. Even if you perceive a spill or leak to be small or insignificant, contact the control room immediately. Do not attempt to control or stop a spill or leak that is beyond your capabilities. Instead, relocate to a safe location and contact the control room. We expect that all workers and contractors will work responsibly with respect to environmental exposures when working with hazardous substances. All site safety data sheets are maintained in an online database and are available for your review. All contractors are required to check with their plant contact before bringing any chemicals on site. Additionally, you will be required to provide specific SDS for all approved materials that are brought on site. Contractors are required to assure that all materials are adequately labeled upon arrival and throughout the product use. The contractor is responsible for the proper use, storage, and disposal of all materials brought on site. Lake Road Generating has identified the most dangerous activities that take place in the electrical power generation industry and has named them the Focus 5 for the 5 categories, which include lockout-tagout, electrical safety, working at heights, confined space entry, and lifting and rigging. Strict adherence to these programs are a requirement for working at Lake Road. Contractors are responsible for providing and maintaining approved PPE for their employees and subcontractors, as well as providing training in PPE selection, use, and care. Standard PPE consists of hard hats, foot protection, safety glasses with side shields, and hearing protection when necessary, such as when the plant is running or tools are in operation. Hair that is long enough to be caught in moving machinery must be adequately contained. Jewelry that could create a hazard is not to be worn while working. Gloves should be worn unless performing intricate work, or in situations where wearing the gloves would present a personal hazard, such as when operating rotating tooling. Workers are required to wear PPE at all times when out in the plant, except in break areas. PPE is not required in the following areas, unless performing work: the control room, the administration building, the warehouse office, or the temporary office trailers. Sometimes specialized PPE is required to perform your task while working at Lake Road Generating. Such specialized PPE may be welding goggles, face shields, respirators, fall protection, flame or arc-resistant clothing, and specific chemical gloves and suits. Any work that must be performed at or above 4 feet is considered elevated work. Workers in elevated positions outside of approved walkways shall be protected from falling by a guardrail system or personal fall arrest system. Contractors are required to provide their own PPE and fall protection as needed. Smoking is prohibited throughout the plant, except in designated areas. The designated smoking areas are the east side of the maintenance shop and the west side of the crane bays of each unit. Eating is allowed only in designated areas. Cell phones shall not be used while walking or in potentially hazardous work areas. Cell phones are only allowed to be used in break areas. All electrical equipment must be properly insulated and/or grounded to ensure safe operation. All electric tools and cords shall be protected with a GFCI device. All tooling, such as grinders that are made with guards, shall have guards properly installed and set correctly for use. No photography will be allowed while on site unless permission is granted from the plant. At Lake Road Generating, a work permit is the centerpiece for all work to be performed on site and is required for all activities. This permit to work is intended to identify hazardous work conditions you may face while on site for the specific job that you will be doing. This permit is issued by an operator at the Lotto trailer between the administration building and Unit 3 and will specify the safety measures and equipment required to perform work in a safe manner. Additional work authorizations may be required for the work you are performing. These specific requirements will be addressed later on in this presentation. A work permit is obtained by the following process. Your plant contact will normally identify the specific tasks you will be performing while on site. Your plant contact will then complete the work permit with you to identify and review job hazards. A pre-job briefing is required to be conducted each shift or when job hazards change. Depending on your work plans, you may need additional safety permits such as hot work, confined space, excavation, and line breaking. No work shall begin until the work permit has been approved by operations. Please note that should conditions, hazards, or steps in the job change, a new review of the job hazards shall be done before continuing the job, and possibly a new work permit may be required. Completing a job hazard analysis, or JHA, is an exercise that is used to identify and mitigate specific hazards for a particular job. The steps include identifying the specific steps involved in completing your work process, the respective hazards of each step, and finally, how to mitigate these identified hazards. If job conditions or plans to complete the job change, a new JSA must be conducted. Personal protective equipment may be the least effective control measure and should be used only if no other solutions are possible. Where work of any nature constitutes a potential hazard to personnel at the plant, appropriate barricades shall be used to identify hazards and warn workers of a hazard or an exclusion zone. The type of barrier will depend on the hazards involved with the work being performed. Safety tape barricades are used to call attention to a hazard, but do not offer physical protection. Safety tape barricades should be put in place before establishing a condition that will present hazards to workers inside the plant. They should be removed as soon as practical after the condition is mitigated. If possible, the tape should be waist high and should encompass the entire hazardous area. When the use of tape is not practical, the plant may elect to use appropriately marked hazard cones or pylons. All barrier tape shall have a tag identifying the hazard and who placed the barrier. Yellow caution tape is used when a safety barrier is needed but imminent danger does not exist. Contractors may enter the area after determining what conditions have caused the barrier to be placed. Red danger tape is used only when imminent danger, injury, or life-threatening conditions exist. Contractors may not enter the area unless they are directly involved in correcting the hazard or have obtained permission from the person in charge. Lake Road Generating requires that all barriers contain a sign which communicates the hazard, the date posted, and contact information for the poster. Lake Road Generating uses many signs to convey important information and safety messages throughout the plant. Hot work refers to any job involving burning, cutting, grinding, welding, or an open flame or spark. Any of these types of work will require a hot work permit and a fire watch. Special PPE for hot work is required to be worn. The hot work permit can be obtained through your site contact. Only designated individuals can authorize cutting and welding operations in areas not specifically designed for such processes. The permit issuer will determine the measures that will be needed to protect the site during and after the hot work process. The permit issuer will outline specific protective measures which will need to be completed prior to using the permit. Cutting or welding shall only be permitted in areas that are or have been made fire safe. When work cannot be moved, the area shall be made safe by removing combustibles or protecting combustibles from ignition sources. Fire watchers shall be able to communicate with the control room via Channel 1 and have a red vest and fire extinguishing equipment readily available. Extinguishers for hot work should be brought on by site contractors. Fire watches shall be maintained for at least 30 minutes after the completion of hot work to detect and extinguish possible smoldering fires. Mounted fire extinguishers in the plant shall not be removed from their designated locations and used for fire watches. After completion of the hot work, the permit requester will turn in the permit at the Lotto trailer and inform the operator that the hot work is completed and the fire watch has been performed for the time required on the permit. Before beginning work at Lake Road Generating and during the permit to work review process, you, your point of contact, or an operator will meet to assess if your work will require you to be exposed to or be around any hazardous energy. All hazardous energy must be controlled through a process called lockout-tagout, or LOTO. You must ensure that the equipment is locked and tagged out in accordance with the site's lockout-tagout procedures. The site's lockout-tagout procedures will be followed without exception. All permits, sign-on sheets, clearance forms, and tags shall be filled out in a legible manner. Before locking on to any lockbox, contractors are given the opportunity to be familiarized with the system and with the controls in place to disable the system and isolate the hazardous energy from the contractor workers. This includes the opportunity to perform a walkdown with a knowledgeable Lake Road Generating individual of the specific isolations made to each hazardous energy source. The lockboxes are located in the Lotto trailer and are managed by an operator. Once the lockout-tagout is hung and the Lake Road Generating work supervisor has signed the form that's accepted to go to work, then contractor workers can apply their individual personal locks to the primary lockboxes in the Lotto trailer designated for this job. Workers must also sign onto the main Lotto form. Satellite lockboxes are located in the passageway between Units 1 and 2 and between Units 2 and 3. Your plant contact will direct you to the correct Lotto box location for your job. Unless otherwise specifically allowed, all contractors shall remove their locks at the end of each shift. A confined space is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work, has limited or restricted means for entry or exit, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. Before beginning work at Lake Road Generating and during the work permit process, you, your point of contact, and possibly the control room operator will meet to assess if your work will require you to enter a confined space. All entry into a confined space must be controlled through a confined space entry permit. All confined spaces on site are labeled with signs that read "Danger, Confined Space, Permit Required for Entry." No confined space entry is allowed without a work permit, a lockout-tagout clearance, and a confined space entry permit. Depending on the work to take place inside the space, a hot work permit may also be necessary. Performing hot work inside a confined space will require a pre-job hazard analysis review by the facility work supervisor for appropriate controls and procedures to be followed. If applicable to the confined space and job to be performed, notification and pre-planning of an available rescue team may also be required. A rescue plan will be required prior to entry of all permit-required confined spaces on site, requiring a rescue team as determined by the facility work supervisor. The staging of retrieval equipment may be necessary, depending on the confined space. This determination will be made during the evaluation of the confined space work and prior to entry into the space. Hot work shall not be performed on the interior, exterior, or near the openings of any confined space which may contain flammable or explosive vapors, until the confined space has been properly cleared. An attendant is required for all confined space entries. The attendant is an individual who monitors, manages, and records the movement of personnel in and out of a permit-required confined space. The entry supervisor can be an entrant or an attendant. The attendant is stationed immediately outside the entrance to the confined space. The attendant shall log all entrants going in and coming out of the confined space by name and time of entry and exit. The name of the attendant shall also be logged with a date and time. Confined space attendants shall have a plant radio and the ability to contact the control room before beginning confined space work. A radio check shall be performed with the control room operator prior to persons being allowed to enter the confined space. The attendant shall not leave the entrance to the confined space while the space is occupied. Additionally, the attendant shall periodically check on the status of the entrance via verbal communication to ensure they are okay without entering the confined space. If there is cause for concern, the attendant shall call the control room on the radio to get assistance. An entrant is an individual who is qualified and authorized to enter a confined space. The entrant shall have a thorough knowledge of the hazards associated with the space. The entrant will ensure that the proper precautions and procedures are followed concerning these hazards. The entrant shall ensure that personal protective equipment (PPE) is used as appropriate and shall have the ability to communicate with the attendant. The entry supervisor is not only responsible for ensuring the opening and qualifying of the spaces for entry, and also for managing the space while it is open. When work has been completed and the space has been evacuated, the facility work supervisor is responsible for final inspection and closeout of the space and informing the control room operator that the space is ready to be closed. Only qualified individuals are permitted to work on or near exposed energized parts. Qualified individuals have been trained in avoiding the electrical hazards of working on or near exposed energized parts. In order to use installed scaffolding, scaffold must be inspected and contain an inspection tag. Scaffold must be inspected at least once per shift. 3 tags can be found on the scaffold: red, do not use; green, ready to use without a harness; and yellow, special condition where fall protection is indicated and special instructions may apply. All forklifts and all-terrain vehicles shall be inspected, used, and maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's guidelines. Vehicles shall only be operated by personnel who are properly trained and qualified. Only the authorized operator is allowed to ride the forklift during use. No other riders are permitted unless the unit is designed for other occupants. Documented inspections shall be performed each shift and before use for all forklifts. All controls, indicators, instrumentation, and markings shall be in place and legible. All vehicles shall be equipped with fire extinguisher, horn, backup alarm, and seat belts. All contractors must provide their own equipment and tools, including obtaining aerial lifts for site work. All aerial lifts shall be inspected, used, and maintained in accordance with manufacturer's guidelines. Equipment shall only be operated by personnel who are properly trained and qualified. Lake Road Generating requires each operator to provide proof of training prior to use. Equipment shall not be used as a crane or material hoist. A documented inspection shall be completed prior to use each day for all aerial lift equipment. All aerial lift controls, indicators, instrumentation, nameplates, and markings shall be in place and legible. Operators' manuals shall be kept with aerial lift equipment at all times. The weight capacity shall be observed for each aerial lift. Personal fall protection shall be utilized at all times while in aerial lift baskets. Personnel must stand firmly on basket floors at all times. Sitting, standing, or climbing on basket toe boards or railings is prohibited. Planks, ladders, or other devices intended to increase working heights from aerial lift platforms are prohibited. Aerial lifts shall not be used, altered, or moved when the lift or any conductive material on them might come within minimum safe distances to energized electrical lines. To operate overhead or mobile cranes, contractors must provide the facility with a copy of their current training certificate. Slings and rigging must be inspected prior to arrival on site and prior to each use. Damaged or defective slings and rigging shall be tagged as defective and removed from service. Thank you for taking the time to educate yourself on our expectations for contractors and visitors of Lake Road Generating. Please remember that no job or task is of such great importance that it must be performed at the expense of health and safety. Your safety and well-being is of the utmost importance to us, and your acceptance and compliance is appreciated. If you have a specific question that was not addressed in this presentation, please ask your trainer at this time.